Got the engine harness all wrapped up and all finalized, all the connections tested. This is a 06 VQ35DE rev up. The power connections to the car will be a battery positive, ignition positive, OBD connection, accelerator pedal position sensor, chassis ground, power steering pressure sensor. That's necessary for the ECU to see to make sure there's no idle issues. Camshaft position sensor, bank 1, that's passenger side on the back of the head towards the intake. Engine coolant temperature sensor, that's on a bracket on the coolant crossover on the back of the head. Exhaust valve position sensor, that's on the back of the head, passenger side, towards the exhaust manifold. Knock sensor, that's in on the same location on the passenger side, towards the intake in the back of the head. Air fuel sensor, bank 1, passenger side. That comes off the exhaust manifold, a wideband sensor. Cylinder number 5 coil towards the firewall. Cylinder 3, passenger side, in the middle. And cylinder 1, passenger side, towards the front of the engine. Intake valve timing control, bank 1, passenger side, top of the timing chain cover by coil pack number 1. It's alternator plug. Oil pressure plug. And oil temperature plug. This is on the very lower part, front part of the oil pan. Ignition ground, that bolts to the middle of the front timing cover. There's a little stud that's in the cover, on top of the cover. This is exhaust valve timing control, bank 1 on the passenger side, on the front of the timing cover. Exhaust valve timing control, bank 2 on the driver's side, on the front of the timing cover. That's intake valve timing control, bank 2 on the driver's side, on top of the front of the timing cover. Mass airflow sensor on the intake. Throttle body connector. Number 2 coil, driver's side front. Number 6 coil, driver's side rear towards the firewall. number 4 coil, driver's side, middle. Exhaust valve position sensor. That's on the back of the head towards the exhaust manifold. Air fuel sensor, bank 2, driver's side. That's to the wideband on the exhaust manifold. That is the fuel injection sub-harness connector. That's on the underneath the throttle body. Camshaft position sensor, bank 2. That's on the driver's side, but on the back of the head towards the intake. That's all the connections for that. Now we can go over the transmission harness that branches off at the firewall. Runs around the bell housing of the transmission, goes down underneath and bolts in or connects underneath the transmission. Heated oxygen sensor, bank 1, passenger side. Heated oxygen sensor, bank 2, driver's side. Crankshaft position sensor. That's located on the driver's side between the bell housing and the engine. This is the neutral position switch. That's on the passenger side, rear of the tail shaft of the transmission. Reverse switch. That's on the driver's side, tail shaft of the transmission. And of course, starter signal. This goes to the little bracket right there at the starter to give the starter solenoid the start signal. And to go over all these connections to tie into the car, you got the oil pressure sensor to run to your gauge. Got the starter signal to run to the ignition switch to activate the starter. Got the reverse wire that just is an open and closed loop. You just tie that in with your reverse lamps. And this is your tack signal that comes from the number 1 coil pack. The alternator exciter circuit. This comes from the charge indicator light and grounds. It's a negative contact to the alternator. And this is a battery connection, 10 amp, protected. So that's it. All cleaned up and simplified. Make all the necessary connections to all the plugs on the engine. And mount your fuse and ignition relay somewhere. Mount the ECU somewhere. What I generally do is mount the ECU on the driver's side kick panel and then mount the fuse and ignition relay right there beside it on that same side, and then mount the OBD connector right there under the dash, right in between right under the steering column. And then of course that runs over to the accelerator pedal. You can tie that in kind of together and up and out of the way. And same with the ground, just somewhere on the driver's side kick panel is a good spot. And you can come out of the firewall. You can come out of the firewall with this, with whatever hole is necessary if you have to run other wires with it, and grommet protect it. feed all those wires from that end through. And then come around the back of the engine, up along the firewall, along the back of the engine, over to the passenger side and start making the necessary connections. And then run it all the way around back to the driver's side, back of the engine, and make the final connections, and that's it. And tie it all up and tidy it up, and you'll have a running engine.